Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Living Manna Church. I am Pastor Dave Saines. You are part of our Wednesday night Bible study. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We, of course, are Living Manna Church. We've been in Romans for quite a while, got a whole bunch of neat stuff to share with you. Before we jump into that, of course, if you're hanging out with us for the first time tonight, make sure to, if you like it, if you enjoy the message, if you're fed by it, hit that like button. If you like, please subscribe. You'll be notified every time we go live. We'll get information out to you so you're part of all of the rest of the studies. We do stuff every single day. There is something going out all the time on our Wednesdays, on our Saturdays for our Hidden Manna, and of course on our weekend services. So we'd love for you to be part of what we do here. Again, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Got some really, really neat stuff to share. We have been in the book of Romans for quite some time. I think this is week number 26, and we are going to continue right in there. So let's just jump right into this. Got lots of information. Hopefully we'll get it all in for tonight. But let's jump right into this first with a prayer, and then we'll go. Father, give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart that's willing to obey. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so here we are. We are in week number 26 of our study of Romans, and tonight's title is The Offering of the Gentiles. The Offering of the Gentiles. And we're still in chapter 15. We're not going to get out of chapter 15 tonight, but we are going to do chapter 15, verses 14 through 21. Some of this is some stuff that we talked about last time, but there's some more information I want to make sure that we all really, really are clear on and that we understand. So if you've got your Bibles, wonderful. If not, of course, the notes are going to be right up there so you can follow with us. We're using the Scriptures version for most of the stuff that we're doing up there. Remember that everything in red is what the Scripture version says, and yellow is my emphasis, or any other color is just me trying to emphasize a thought, an idea, to help us understand what the text or the context of what's being said actually is. Okay, so with all of that kind of out of the way, let's jump into this. Let's get into our Bible study, okay? Here we go. Divisions and stumbling. Romans chapter 15 and verse 16. This is going to kind of be our key verse for today. It says, let me take these off for a second. And let me actually make it a little bit bigger so everybody can see it. To be a servant of Yehovah, Messiah, to the nations, with the priestly duty of bringing the good news of Elohim, so that the offering of the nations, the Gentiles, becomes acceptable, set apart by the Holy Spirit, or by the set apart Spirit. Excuse me, guys. So we were in chapter 15 last week. We went through quite a bit of stuff, and I'm not going to do a whole review again, because if you're watching with me all the way up to 26 weeks, you guys kind of know where we've been with all of this. But it's really, really important that we understand the mystery, because as we're going to talk about a little bit more today, the mystery. Well, here's the verses. Let's read through the verses first, and then we can backtrack from there. Romans chapter 15, verses 14 through 21 say the following. Now I myself am persuaded concerning you, my brothers, that you too be filled with goodness, complete in your knowledge. And by knowledge, he means the mystery. We talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it some more this week. But he's talking to these people saying, I believe that you are complete. I've given you the complete information. You are complete in knowledge in the mystery, able also to admonish one another. But I have written more boldly to you, in part as reminding you, because of the favor given to me by Elohim, to be a servant of Yeshua Messiah to the nations. And again, remember, nations means Gentiles. That's me there in yellow, the PDP version, if you would, with the priestly duty of bringing the good news of Elohim, this is our verse, so that the offering of the nations, the Gentiles, and I put in there the word beast, because we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Because we're used to the name Gentiles, we're used to the word nations, but I also want you to be familiar with the word beast. Not the beast, we're not talking about the revelation beast, but actually in a sense, I guess we are, but we mean nations. So that the offering of the nations becomes acceptable, set apart by the Holy Spirit, the set apart Spirit. Therefore, therefore I have cause for boasting in Messiah Yeshua in the matters pertaining to Elohim. For I shall not presume to speak of any matter except of what Messiah has worked out through me in word and deed, to make the nations, the Gentiles, obedient. Obedient to what? To Yah's instruction, to the word of God. In power of signs, wonders, in power of the Spirit of Elohim, so that from Jerusalem and round about to Illyricum, I have completed the preaching of the good news. We're going to see that word mentioned a lot, the good news of Messiah. And so I was ambitious to bring the good news where Messiah had not been named, lest I should build on another man's foundation. But as it has been written, to whom it was not announced concerning him, the nations, the beast, that's who he's speaking about, those who haven't heard, they shall see, and those that have not heard shall understand. Verse 22, and this is really important. I stuck this in there. It seems like it's a different topic, but it's not. This is absolutely related. This is why I was often hindered from coming to you. I want to start at the end of this verse, that verse 22, because we kind of went over a little bit of this already last week. This is just Shaul sort of, just summarizing all that he has been saying throughout the entire book. What the entire book has been about is the joining of to Jew first, the information goes to the Jew first, but also to the Gentile, and that these two people groups are being grafted in together. And actually, I guess the better way of saying it is that the Gentile group is being grafted into the Jewish believers, the Hebrew believers, and they are to be one. The uncultivated vine is being grafted into and with the cultivated vine. Now, that may sound like semantics, but it's not. It is very, very important to understanding really what the story is about. So these Gentiles that we've been talking about for multiple chapters, and Saul has been ministering to them on how to get along, especially with regard to the context of what's going on in the first century, the animosity between Jew and Gentile. He's trying to bring these two people together. He's trying to teach the Jew to get out of the traditions of the fathers, to walk in Torah, to walk as Moses has asked us to walk. But he's also preaching and teaching to the Gentile to leave the paganism behind and come into and learn how to walk in Yah the right way. A very, very difficult situation that he's in. He's preaching to two very different people groups and trying to mold them together and make them one. An astounding, a huge effort on his part to do that. And so that becomes the mystery. We'll talk about the mystery in a little bit more detail in a second. But I want you to notice verse 22, as I said, this preaching of the mystery that he's spoken to them about. He's wanted to go to them, and he said this before, and he's going to say it again by the end of chapter 16. His desire is to go to Rome, to be able to meet this synagogue, to meet these believers. He knows them. As a matter of fact, in chapter 16, he's going to go through a whole list of names and people that he knows there, that he's sharing with. So he definitely has had interaction with these people before, and yet he says, for this reason, he says, this is why I was often hindered from coming to you. And what he's referring to is this notion, this idea that these two separate people groups are coming together, Jew and Gentile, both believers in Yeshua now. But this was a very contentious concept in the first century, and it's been throughout all centuries. And we're going to see that this becomes the core to understanding, A, how Yah wanted things to be, and kind of the way that they've unfolded throughout history. And so he's telling them, I've had difficulty. And we see some of those difficulties in the book of Acts as Saul is at Jerusalem and he's sharing with them about what Yah does with the Gentiles. And the response of the Jews in the temple is that they riot, they go nuts, they go crazy, they want to kill Saul. So this is what he's referring to, that as he's preaching this, as he's going from synagogue to synagogue, from place to place, he's either getting the Jews that are really, really upset at him because they don't want to hear anything about Gentiles coming in. Or he's getting it from the other side. Gentiles that have come in don't want to be taught by the Jews. And this division, this animosity is going to play a big part historically into how things unfold in the future. And so he tells them, this is an issue. I've wanted to come to you before, but this issue, this has been so contentious. This mystery that I just shared with you is so contentious that it has prohibited me from actually going to see you. Now, let's take a look at the mystery, because we talked about this last week, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. The mystery of the gospel, what Saul has been explaining throughout the book of Romans, but certainly very, very emphatically from chapters 9 on, all the way to the end of chapter 16, is really summarized in another book, though he's saying it in Romans. Let's read it in Ephesians, because again, he tells the same information, or he teaches the same information to every congregation he goes to, whether the congregation is predominantly Jews, which was probably most of the congregations, or it was a small little house congregation that maybe was just Gentiles. Doesn't matter. The information is the same for all of them. This is the mystery of the gospel. Ephesians chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, Saul tells us what this mystery actually is. And here it is. Because of this, I, Shaul, am a prisoner of Yeshua Messiah on behalf of you nations, on behalf of you Gentiles. If indeed you have heard of the administration of the favor of Elohim that was given to me for you. So he's talking about his ministry to them. And we know when Saul just first gets started, the whole road to Damascus thing, he's blinded. He is told by Yah through Ananias, he is going to be an emissary to the Jews and to the Gentiles. So that's kind of what he's kind of confirming here. Verse 3 says, that by revelation was made known to me the secret. Now, again, in the scriptures version, it says secret. King James and some other version, it says mystery. I like the idea of a mystery. The word just seems better to me. You can use either or. They mean the same thing. Something that was said before, but not fully understood at this time. So revelation was made known to me, the secret, the mystery, as I wrote before briefly. In reading this, then, you are able to understand my insight into the secret, the mystery of Messiah, which was not made known in other generations. Now, this is, I've got it, sort of highlighted there. This is really, really important, which was not made known, not understood. It was made known. It was spoken about. We're going to see that tonight. This stuff was spoken about from cover to cover of the scripture. But while it was spoken about, it was not understood. And certainly by the first century, as Yeshua comes, as the apostles are now going out to minister, as Saul is going out to minister, this truth had been lost. Not only had it been lost, the people had gone totally the opposite direction in animosity towards one another. So, which was made known, verse 5, which was made known or understood to the sons of men, to the prophets. We're talking about Isaiah, Jeremiah, Moses, all the rest of them, in other generations, as it has now been revealed by the Spirit. So Saul is saying, we have the ability to understand something that even the people who wrote these books didn't fully get. And certainly the people who came after them didn't fully get. Has been given, revealed by the Spirit to set apart emissaries and prophets. Verse 6, and here, this is the mystery. If you didn't underline this, if you've got a Bible, make sure you underline this, just and circle it, highlight it, put, this is the mystery. This is the mystery, guys, of the whole Bible. This is it. This is paramount. Here's the mystery. The nations, the Gentiles, are to be co-heirs, united in the same body, and partakers together with Israel, with Judah, with the tribes, with the 12 tribes, in the promise in Messiah through the good news or through the gospel. So generically speaking, the mystery then becomes that this is a story that has been told right from the beginning, that ultimately what Yah is trying to do or is going to accomplish is to join what has become these two separate groups of people that are in total opposition to one another and bring them together as one body. And this is real important that we get this. It is not two separate bodies. It was never intended to be two separate religions. It was intended to be one group. One group, the nations joining the Hebrews, the nations learning how to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the nations learning how to understand the instruction as given through the prophet Moses and lived by Yeshua Messiah. And the catalyst for all of this, the thing that puts it into motion, is what we call the good news. But the good news was given way before. But when we say good news, of course, we mean the coming of Messiah. Messiah becomes the catalyst, that step that had to happen to begin to make what was not previously known, to make it understood. So again, this is a little bit of review. So, but we got to get this. We got to understand this. So this truth, this mystery, has always been there. So Saul's talking to this congregation, and he's telling them that I'm speaking more boldly to you. You need to get this. This is really, really important that you guys understand this, that this group is coming together, that the uncultivated vine, the Gentiles, are now being grafted into the cultivated vine with the Hebrews. Both of them believers in Yeshua Messiah, but one of them understanding Torah, the other not. And in chapter 15, he gives us a couple of different quotes. We talked about these quotes last week. Again, you can check out last week's message to get some more of this information. But he quotes from three, what we would call, from our perspective, Old Testament authors. From their perspective, this is just the scripture. But he quotes both the Psalms, the prophets, and he quotes the Torah. He quotes Psalms 18 and Psalms 117, which are Psalms of King David. Great resource. I mean, you don't get better than King David. He also quotes Isaiah 11. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit. And he quotes Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 32, the Song of Moses. So if you look at it sort of from a bird's eye view, Saul is using as the proof text these four different quotes. Again, you could look them up. These four different quotes in chapter 15 to prove to the people that he's writing to that this mystery I'm telling you about has already been told. We just didn't get it. We just didn't understand it. It didn't come to fruition. We didn't understand how this was going to happen. And of course, here's Deuteronomy 32 and verse 43, which should just give us a little bit of a summary, a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a taste as to what he's referring to as the bringing together of these groups. Chapter 32 and verse 43 says, "Rejoice, O nations," or Gentiles, together with his people. And by his people, of course, Moses, because it's the Song of Moses, he's talking about the house of Israel. So Saul is saying, look, this stuff's out there. I'm not making this up. This has already been there. But we've all experienced this before, how we can read something again and again and again, and we just don't see it. And then all of a sudden, one day you read something and it's like, oh my goodness, that's what he was talking about. How did I not see that? How did I not get that? Of course, this is Yah opening up your understanding. And very often what has to happen is we need to understand elementary things first. There's a process to learning. You got to start with a little, and then you got to build up from there. Most people just want to know the ending. They want to know all the big stuff. They want to come up with all the doctrines of all the big stuff. And by big stuff, of course, we mean Revelation and Beast and Mark and all the rest of that. But we don't know the beginning stuff, the foundational stuff. And if you don't know the foundational stuff, there's no way you're going to really understand the deep stuff. And that's just sort of common sense with anything that we learn, any process that we go through of understanding college, getting a career, learning how to do something. You have to understand what comes first before you get to the end product. So with that, this information was always there. This information that the nations are to be co-heirs, not separate, not different, though that's how it's turned out pretty much, not separate, not different, but that they are to rejoice with the house of Israel, which is exactly what Saul has already said. The uncultivated vines are grafted into and among the cultivated vines. Romans chapter 11 and verse 25 sort of gives us, again, this is Saul just saying the same thing in a different way. He says, "For I do not wish you to be ignorant of the secret." Of what secret? The mystery we just read about in Ephesians 3. This is big. This is the very core of this gospel message. Now, I want you to get this. This is the core, or the core result of the gospel message that Yeshua has come. So I don't want you, the people in Rome, to be ignorant of this secret, this mystery. Then the mystery, of course, that the Gentiles with the Jew together, they're being grafted in among them, brothers. And here's why. Because if you don't get this message, now he sort of sneaks us in here, but this is going to become really important by the time we get to chapter 16. If you don't get this, if you don't understand this mystery correctly, if you can't see it, if you don't have eyes to see it, if you don't have ears to hear it, then what happens is, lest you should be wise in your own estimations. In other words, we're going to make up stuff. If you don't get this, if you don't understand what the mystery actually is, there is the potential then, well, first of all, to misunderstand. And if you misunderstand, then what we wind up doing is we fill in the blanks with what we think we know. And that is very, very dangerous. So, lest you be wise in your own estimation, and of course, this is the problem that he's speaking about, that hardening in part has come over Israel until the completeness of the nations has come in. That's the mystery. The nations are being grafted in. And verse 26, and so as the nations come in, as the fullness of the nations come in, and so all Israel shall be delivered or saved. As it has been written, the deliverer shall come out of Zion. I didn't underline that, but that's going to be an important phrase later on. The deliverer shall come out of Zion, and he, this deliverer, obviously Yeshua Messiah, shall turn away wickedness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So he is connecting. Listen to what's being said here. He is connecting the covenant that is coming by this Redeemer, the he that shall turn away wickedness from Jacob. He is connecting this covenant with the joining of the nations into the house of Israel to be one people. And he's telling us, if you don't get this, if you don't understand this, if you're ignorant of this mystery and how it works, then you have the potential to be wise in your own estimation, to just come up with stuff. And that is a problem. And it has been a problem and is still a problem today for the religious world around us. Of course, we've gotten some understanding ourselves, so we can relate with all of this. So it's always been there. this issue. He's telling us this mystery has always been there, and I want you guys to understand it. Now, I want to throw something at you. I know we've talked about this before. We've used the word nations. We've used the word Gentiles. We're now hearing from Saul that the covenant is about bringing in the Gentiles, which makes sense because John 3:16 says, "For Yah so loved the world." This is a world issue. This is a global issue. It's not just a Jew versus Gentile issue. There is no Jewish way of doing it and then a Gentile way of doing it. This is a global issue, a world issue, but there is a process to understanding it. And by the first century, and even way before the first century, and certainly way after the first century, the problem is the people of Judah, the majority, the people in leadership were either could not see this, did not have eyes to see it, ears to hear it, or they absolutely just refused it. They rejected it. They did not like the idea. Many within Judah, and again, we'll point to some more examples later on, but many in Judah were so deeply opposed to the idea of a Gentile, a pagan, what we would say a former pagan, former Gentile, in any way being equal with and receiving the promises, the same promises that have been passed down from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to the house of Israel. This was a major issue in the first century. So this is why Saul's saying, I wanted to come to you guys before, but what I'm telling people is really causing some major problems, and it has prevented me from coming to you. Now, so you've got the Hebrew part of the equation that is totally opposed to this idea, or the majority are opposed to it. But then you also have the nations. And I'm going to use the word beast. We're going to talk about why in just a second. But the nations, the uncultivated branches, while they are coming in, what winds up happening actually pretty quick, within the first 150 years, in fact, even before that, we see it in the book of 3 John, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well, that there became an animosity, not just between Jew to Gentile, but the other way as well, that the Gentiles looked at the Jews as inferior and rejected Jewish or Hebrew instruction in the things of Yah. And just like we just read in Romans, they became wise in their own estimations. They made up stuff. They kind of filled in the gaps. Once they removed the instruction away from it, they had to fill in the gaps to the story. And what winds up happening, at least at first, is a Greek version of the God of Israel. They don't even call it the God of Israel, but the God who became a savior and died for humankind becomes, first of all, a Greek version of that God. And then later on, some 300 years later, then becomes a Roman version of that same person. And that version is really what makes what makes the religious world that you and I have inherited today. So there's the truth of who Yeshua is, this truth that the two are supposed to be together, and then there's this other stuff because of the animosity. So while you have Judaism that wants absolutely nothing to do with the Gentiles today, and you've got the Gentiles who want nothing to do with Judaism, this begins here. This mixture, this volatile mixture begins at least here in the first century as the mystery is being revealed. And so I want to connect with you, or for you, the term beast, which we've talked about before. Every time you see the word beast, it means the nations. You refer to Daniel chapter 7 and some of the other chapters when Daniel sees the beast. He's talking about nations, the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar sees as a statue. Most of you guys are very, very familiar with that, so we don't really have to develop that, except that I want you to understand that that's an issue. So you've got this seed of just division that is already there, that Saul is doing his darndest to try to bring them together and help them to see what the truth of the scripture is. Because if you see what it's really about, hopefully you'll get over this and you'll do what Yah has actually asked you to do. So this term beast, while of course, we can go back to Daniel, we can go back to the scriptures about the lion and the bear and the leopard, those are beasts, those are nations. Now, those are terms for specific nations, the vision that Nebuchadnezzar has. But as a general concept, the term for the nations has always been beasts or animals or beasts of the field or birds of the air is a colloquial term. It's a poetic term throughout the scripture to reference the nations. And if Saul's telling us that this is a mystery, this is something that was already there, already spoken of. We didn't see it. We didn't get it. We didn't understand it. You're going to see that this becomes a major theme in the Gospels, in what Yeshua says, in what Yeshua teaches. But I guess maybe one of the easiest places to start at to understand this, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is Acts chapter 10, Peter's vision. Again, we've talked about this before. You know the story. He sees the vision of this animals, these wild animals, these beasts, these birds of the air, creepy crawly things coming down on a sheet. And of course, the master speaks to Peter and tells him to take, kill, and eat. And again, we know so many because we are wise in our own estimations. We don't understand what the story is actually about. Most people think that that has to do with Yah changing the food laws, and we've gone over this before. This has nothing to do with Yah changing the food laws. But what this does have to do with and defines for us in a New Testament sense, or really just confirms what has already been said throughout all of the book, is the following. Here's Peter's vision, chapter 10 and verse 28, Peter's own summation of what actually happened. But Elohim has shown me that I should not call any man. This is not about eating unclean food. This is about men. This is about humanity. He says not to call any man or beast, because that's the picture Yah used. He used this sheet of just all of these animals, and he tells them to take, kill, and eat. So the analogy is these animals represent men, the men of the nations. So he says not to call any man or any beast of the field. I want to keep inserting that. To call any beast of the field common or unclean. You can go back and check out the common and unclean study that we did for more information about what that means. Verse 34, skip on down just a little bit in the book of Acts chapter 10 to verse 34, and again it gives a little bit of a summary. And opening up his mouth, Kepha, Peter says, truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation, that is, in every Gentile nation, or let's use the term that Yah gave in the vision, in every beast of the field or birds of the air. He who fears him, fears Yehovah, and works righteousness is accepted by him. And of course, they hear the gospel story and the Spirit falls on them, and all of that stuff works out. And Peter is just flabbergasted because this was new to him. That here it is, he's experiencing the mystery firsthand. That this was to the Jew first, but also to the Gentile, which is exactly how Romans starts off introducing this topic to us. So we use this sort of as a reference so that you have a reference to look at and say, okay, yeah, I get it. The analogy here in this vision is that the nations, the Gentiles, are referred to as beasts. They're nations, but they are called beasts. Okay, so with that out of the way, verse 36, because it goes on. The story goes on after Peter says that I perceive that all men from all nations, they work righteousness. They'll be accepted. Yah has no partiality. Listen to what he now says in verse 36. It says, he, meaning the master, sent word to the children of Israel, bringing the good news. So real important. Who was ordained to bring this good news to the beasts, to the nations? Israel was. Judah was. The apostles were. And not just them. Moses was. Isaiah was. Daniel was. This is a song, and I use it as the term song because this is a prophetic term that is used later on, that there is a song that can only be sung by a certain group of people. Well, this song has been being sung for a long time, and nobody knew it. That's why it says only that certain group knows the song. And yet now that song, that mystery is now being revealed in our age with Yeshua Messiah. So Peter says he sent word to the children of Israel, bringing the good news. Peace through Yeshua Messiah. He is master of all. You know what word came to be throughout all Judah, beginning from Galilee after the immersion which John proclaimed. Show Elohim did not anoint Yeshua of Nazareth with the set-apart spirit and with power, who went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil. So he's going over the gospel story. He's going over the account of what we now call the gospel story. Who were oppressed by the devil, for Elohim was with him. Verse 39. And we, meaning the Jews of his day, because don't forget, all of the apostles, all of the disciples were Jews. Yah gave this song to the house of Israel. They've been singing it for a long time, though many did not know the song or did not understand the full mystery. Verse 39, and we are witnesses of all he did, both in the country of the Yehudim, the Jews, and in Jerusalem, again speaking about Yeshua's ministry, whom they even killed by hanging on a tree, a timber, talking about the death of Messiah. Elohim raised up this one on the third day and let him be seen, not to all people, but to witnesses, those having been chosen before by Elohim. To us who ate and drank with him have after he arose from the dead. And he commanded us, the Jews, to proclaim to the people, both Jewish, and now we're finding out, and Gentile, to proclaim to both the people, Jewish and Gentile, and to be witnesses that it is he of who was appointed by Elohim to be judge of the living and the dead. And when it talks about living and dead, it means those living, those alive in Yah, or those who are dead to Yah. They may still be living, but you are considered dead to Yah until you are made alive. So that's what this is referring to. So Yah this one who died on the tree will be judge of both the living and the dead. And verse 43, to this one, all the prophets bear witness, that through his name, everyone believing in him does receive forgiveness of sins. So here's Peter right out, and this shocked Peter. This was so against the traditions that he was taught that Gentiles are on par. They are now being brought in as equals, receiving the same experiences as they did at that day at Shavuot at the temple. This is the mystery. And Peter tells us these words were first given through Israel, and then to the apostles, all Jews, all Hebrews, and it was their job to take it. And now this message via the Jew, to the Jew first, is now being relayed to the Gentile as well. This is the process. But in all of this, I want you to recognize, how does Yah get this across to Peter? With this vision of animals, birds of the air, beasts of the field. This is who he was talking about, because that's how the Hebrew mindset thought of the nations, and probably very much still does think of the nations as wild beasts. Okay, so if that's so, this mystery then should be throughout the scripture. It should be everywhere, because that's what Peter just said. This song, and I'm using the word song because it's connected to something later on, this song has been sung for a long time. It's been sung since the beginning. The problem is most people don't hear the song. They don't know the tune. They don't understand what's being said. And if you are not wise to this, if you don't understand the mystery, we'll have problems, and we're going to fill in the blanks by ourselves, as Paul already told us. So let's see if we can identify what he's talking about when he says this is given to the house of Israel, to all the prophets. Let's find it. Here's a big one. And I want to take our time with this, because we've gone over, I think by now, enough of the gospel story, enough of both the history of what actually happened to begin now to understand. Like I said, you got to know the elementary stuff before Yah gives you the deeper stuff. So here's something I know we've probably all read before. I know I've mentioned it before, but we're going to take a look at it, and I'm going to show you that this story, this covenant that was being spoken of to the Gentile, to bring the nations in, was indeed spoken again and again and again by the prophets, though the first century people did not understand. Here's the book of Hosea, chapter 2. Now, you know the book of Hosea, it's about the scattering of the house, the northern kingdom called Jezreel, which means to sow or to scatter. But it's also about Judah, Judah as well, as the temple's going to be destroyed. And listen, and yet it says at some point they're going to come back. But chapter 2 becomes a wonderful synopsis of the mystery. This is actually, in fact, the song that only that one group can sing, who gets resurrected as the first fruits on the day of Messiah's resurrection. This is the song they have been singing. This is the song only they were able to sing, because Yah used Israel to speak to the world. So here's the song. Let's see if we can get it, and let's plug it in and see where this fits in history and how it fits. Here's Hosea chapter 2. We're going to go right through the whole chapter. All right. So here's verse 1. Say to your brothers, O my people, and your sisters, O compassionate one, strive with your mother. Now, by mother, it means Jerusalem, the temple, the woman, the mother. Strive with your mother, strive, for she is not my wife. Well, now, think about that for a second. He's painting the picture that Jerusalem, the temple, the people, Yah's divorcing himself from them. She's not going to be my wife, which means she then becomes, she's been a harlot, but she becomes unmarried. We're going to find out that her husband dies, and she's going to become a widow. And she has children, and her children will be orphans. So here it is. Strive with your mother, Jerusalem. Strive, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Those are powerful, powerful words. Let her put away her whorings from her face, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked, and shall set up as one on the day, as set her up as on the day when she was born, and shall make her like a wilderness, and shall set her like a dry land. When he's talking about on the day she was born, this is a reference to Ezekiel 16, that when Yah found Jerusalem, he speaks of Jerusalem as a young baby who was just in her afterbirth with blood all over her. No different than anybody else. She was not special. In fact, she was less than special. And yet Yah calls her and brings and makes her, Jerusalem, makes the temple, makes the people of Israel associated with her, his bride. So he's saying, I can put you back there. I can make you that woman again. Again, verse 3, lest I strip her naked, and shall set her up as the day when she was born, and shall make her like a wilderness, and shall set her like a dry land, and I shall put her to death with thirst, and I shall not have compassion on her children. So, think about the contrast of that when Yeshua says, if you're thirsty, I'll give you to drink. If Yah's saying here, I'm going to not give you to drink, and you're going to be thirsty. It's the total opposite of what Yeshua was saying. This is what was going to happen to Jerusalem. They're not going to understand. They're not going to get it. Why? Because they've been playing the harlot, because the temple has become a harlot, the people have become a harlot. So this is the context. So we're actually, it's the same story that just keeps unfolding again and again and again. So he's going to make her like a dry land. Verse 4, and I shall not have compassion on her children. Well, if he's no longer married to her, then the children don't have a father, and the children are now orphans. This is why later on in the Gospels, when Yeshua says, I call you friends because, not just servants, because servants do not know what their master is doing, but I call you friends because I'm telling you all that I'm doing. He says, I will not leave you as orphans. This is the connection to it. This is speaking about what is coming upon both the northern house, the southern house, but what is the whole story that's going to unfold before us? It says, for they are children of whorings. For their mother has whored, the temple, Jerusalem. She who conceived them has acted shamelessly. For she said, I go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. Therefore, see, I am hedging up your way with thorns, and I shall wall her in so that she does not find her paths. So he's speaking about what's happening to Jerusalem at that day, but what's going to happen in the day of Yeshua, because that's when everything's going to change. But here's why. She's become this whore. We're very familiar with the story. She with her other lovers is saying these other lovers are the ones that are giving me my food, giving me my drink. Let's follow the narrative. Verse 7 says, and let me just grab my glasses. Verse 7 says, and she shall pursue her lovers, but not overtake them, and shall seek them and not find them. The woman, Jerusalem, the house of Israel, both of them. Then she shall say, let me go and return to my first husband. So he's saying that she's going to do all of this stuff and be this whore and decide when things aren't going good, well, then I can just go back to my first husband. No, you can't. And we're going to find out that she can't. Let me go back to my first husband. These are the very words we read in Revelation. I think it's chapter 18, where the woman, the harlot of Babylon, who he is talking about here, says, I am not a widow. I am a queen. This is what he's referring to. I'm not a widower. My children are not orphans. No, that's exactly what he's saying. Your children are. That's exactly who she is. For then it was better for me than now. Verse 8. And she did not acknowledge that I gave her grain and new wine and oil, and increased her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. And what he's referring to is that, the worship of Baal and all the other things that they were doing. He's saying that the people were saying their harvests, the prosperity that they had did not come from Yehovah, but came from the worship of Baal and Malak and the killing of the children. That's why things were as good. And we see the same story play out in the book of Ezekiel and in the book of Jeremiah, when he tries to warn them and tell them, stop doing the things you're doing, stop baking the cakes to Ashtaroth, and the people rebel and say, no, ever since we turned back to Yah, everything's gone bad. We're going to go back to worshiping Ashtaroth, because when we worshiped Ashtaroth, then we had food, then we had this and we had that, and everything was good. This is exactly the same story that he is saying here. Verse 9, therefore I shall turn back. And I put return there because you read it in other versions. What it actually says is, therefore I, Yehovah, because this is Yah speaking in the first person. Therefore I shall return. I shall return. We're talking about Yeshua. Who is the God that returns? Yeshua does. And he's also speaking about 70 AD, and you'll see why in a second. Therefore, I shall turn back and shall take my grain in its time, and my new wine in its appointed time. And I shall take my wool and my linen covering her nakedness. Verse 10, and now I shall uncover her shame before the eyes of her lovers, and no one shall deliver her from my hand. Verse 11, and I shall cause all her rejoicing, her festivals, her appointed times, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all of her appointed times to cease. This is telling us what's going to happen to the temple. When Yah returns, when he comes in the flesh, he is going to remove all of these things. This is why he says to the woman at Samaria, not on this mountain and neither in Jerusalem will there be worship. But Yah is looking for worship in spirit and in truth. He was telling us what was about to happen to the temple. Of course, you know the words, not one stone upon another. He calls out judgment on them. So in a timeline, that's what we're reading about here. This is the story of the gospel. The temple worship will be destroyed, which is, of course, what we're reading in chapter 17 and 18 of Revelation as well. So he's saying, I'm going to return. I'm going to take all of this away. You guys have played the harlot. You are a widower. Your children are orphans. And I'm going to remove everything I gave to you because you are saying the Baals gave this to you. So I'm just going to come and I'm going to remove it all. You've been a harlot. The temple is a harlot. Verse 12, and lay waste her vines and her fig trees. The people are referred to as trees. And this is in Ezekiel and also in Revelation. The people are trees, the green trees. He says, I will remove them, of which she has said, these are my harlot fees that my lovers have given me. And I shall make them, the people of Judah, a forest. And the beast of the field, the nations, shall eat them, destroy them. So he's telling them what's going to happen to Jerusalem. Yah's going to use them, which is exactly what happens. He uses Rome. This is Revelation chapter 17. The beast turns on the woman, destroys the woman. So we're reading in a timeline. This is telling us in Hosea chapter 2, it's giving us the summary, and he's already mentioned the beast here in a very negative context, but the story's not over yet. Let's follow the context, or let's follow the storyline as we read on. Here is verse 13. Yah continues, and I shall punish her for the days of the Baals, to which she burned incense and adorned herself with her rings and jewelry, and went after her lovers and forgot me. So Yah is a jealous God. He told them that right from the beginning, and they did not listen. Declares Yehovah. Verse 14, therefore, see, I am alluring her, and shall lead her children. If he's going to destroy them, if he's going to take all this away, I'm going to lead her children into the wilderness. He's going to scatter them, which is exactly what the word Jezreel, speaking about the northern kingdom, means. Jezreel means to sow, to scatter. I'm going to scatter them where? Into the wilderness. To scatter Jezreel until they learn to obey. He's going to scatter them out there, but he's going to allure them. He's going to call them back. And shall speak to her heart, to her seed, to her children's heart. I'm going to speak to her heart. He's going to speak comfort to Zion. That's a really important phrase. We'll see why in just a few minutes. He's going to speak comfort to Zion and to give her vineyards from there and the valley of Achor. Now, the word Achor is related to the word of the term Achan, and it means a tribulation, punishment. So he's saying this is going to happen. This process is going to happen as they are scattered in the valley of Achor in the time of tribulation. Again, not a 7-year period at the end of age. What's been going on for a long time. And it's akin to Achan. It's a reference to Achan and the story of Achan. If you go back and you check it out in the Torah, it's the story of when one of the house of Israel mixes the things of the nations, brings in the gods, the robe of Shinar, the gold, the silver, and brings it into his tent and gets caught and eventually winds up being killed for it by the whole house being stoned, and not just him, all of his family. So that's the connection in our minds that we should have, even in the midst. How did all of this come about? Because of that very thing. They had mixed the things of the nations into the worship of Yah, and judgment had now come. But even being scattered, he's still going to woo her. Verse says, and there she shall respond as in the days of her youth, as in the days when she came up from the land of Mitzrayim. And it shall be in that day, declares Yehovah, that you will call me husband. So he just gave the whole bad story of what's happening, but he's saying, even with all of that going on, I'm still going to woo you. I'm still going to call out, even in the midst of tribulation, and some of you are going to come back. Some of you are going to be able to call me husband. And we're going to find out that, again, she's a widower. There's going to be a new remarriage, a betrothal, which is exactly what Romans 7 was all about when Yah says, if you know the Torah, a woman is bound to her husband until he dies. But once he dies, she is free to marry another. So what he's saying is, you're going to be free to marry another, and the other you're going to marry is going to be me, because you're going to call me my husband, even though I already said you're not my wife. The only way that's possible is through the ministry of Yeshua, which is what Romans 7 teaches us. So one more time. Verse 16, and it shall be in that day, declares Yehovah, that you shall call me husband, a new betrothal, and no longer call me by Baal. That means Lord, but really what he's saying is by a foreign god. You're not going to mix these things anymore. In the time of Achan, in the valley of Achor, you're going to get it. You're going to come back. You're going to be re-betrothed to me. And you're no longer going to mix the things like Achan did, but you're going to call me husband. Verse 17, and I shall remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their name. So this is a long process. We're talking about, what has happened in the history of Israel, but specifically what happens when the master comes and the temple's destroyed and all these things are removed. So put that in sort of a timeline, if you would, of your thinking. Let's read the next verse, or the next part of the narrative. Verse 18 says, and in that day, the day of Zion's comfort. He's calling out comfort to them. And in that day, and when does comfort come? We're going to find out in a second. It comes when Yeshua comes, the acceptable year of the Lord. And in that day, the day of Zion's comfort, I shall make a covenant. Well, we know that's exactly what Yeshua does, right? He comes and he renews the covenant. There's the timeline. And in that day, I shall make a covenant, a renewed covenant with the house of Judah and also with the house of Ephraim, for I shall make a renewed covenant for them with the beasts of the field. Wow. Hold on a second. Do you realize what was just said? He just went through what all the problem is, the divorce and you're orphans and you're not my people and all the rest of that. But even in tribulation, I'm going to call you. Some of you are going to come. You're going to call me my husband again. This covenant, this comfort's going to go out. And in this covenant, I am making a covenant with you, the house of Israel, all the tribes, and with the beasts of the field. Guys, that is the mystery. So is Saul right? Is Peter right that this word, this song, this mystery has been being sung for a long time, but nobody got it? Nobody pieced it together. Nobody wanted to by the first century. They hated each other. And yet here's the song. And who are the only ones that sing it? The house of Israel, the first fruits that would be resurrected. They've been singing this song for a long time. Here's the song. I'm going to make a covenant with them and with the beasts of the field. That's the mystery Saul is talking about in the book of Romans, in the book of Ephesians, in the book of Galatians, and also the mystery of the book of Revelation. And so not only so I'm going to make a covenant with the beast of the field and with the birds of the heavens. We've already read that. That's almost verbatim the description of what Peter sees coming down in the sheet. In fact, it is verbatim the very thing that Peter sees coming down in a sheet. And with the birds of the heavens, and with the creeping creatures of the ground. Again, Acts chapter 10 for a reference. So what this is describing is actually what happens in Acts chapter 10, or at least Acts chapter 10 is the beginning of this. And so we now see Saul teaching them, saying, listen, if I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brethren, because if you are, you will become wise in your own conceits, and that's going to cause problems. This is pivotal to understanding the gospel. This is actually the gospel. Let's take a look at the birds of the heavens. When bow and sword and battle I break from the earth. He's talking about Messiah bringing this new covenant will eventually stop all war. We're talking about the coming of the master, talking about a sword coming out of his mouth, coming on a white horse, destroying the nations, destroying the beast, destroying those that are against him. No more war. Men will take their swords and make them into plowshares. That's what's being referred to here. No more sword. No more bow, no more sword. And the battle I break from the earth. He's going to rule with a rod of iron. No more of that stuff. And I shall make them, my people, Israel, the Netzarim. I'm going to make them lie down in safety. Lie down in safety with who? With the beast of the field, with the birds of the air, and with the creepy crawly things. In other words, I'm going to make them lie down in safety with the nations. When? When he comes, when he rules with a rod of iron, when he establishes his kingdom. So I want you to see the timeline that's being spoken of here. And I shall make them, the Netzarim, lie down in safety with the beast of the field, the nations, verse 19. And I shall take you as a bride. He's talking about the wedding feast. And again, what's the story of the wedding feast? Matthew 22. What's the story of the wedding feast? He sent out the invitation. Not everybody listened. They didn't want to come. So he took his servants that did listen, said, go and get this gospel, get this message out to anyone, to everybody from the highways or the byways, good or bad. But he sends his angels, he sends his army to go and destroy that miserable city, to wipe it out. That's what we're reading here. This whole chapter is the story of the wedding feast. It's the song that's being sung before Yeshua gives us the story in Matthew 22, or the parable in Matthew 22. It's being played out right here in a much, much bigger sense, but it's still the same song. Same song, same meaning, same lyrics, same mystery. Verse 19 again, and I shall take you as a bride unto me forever, and take you as a bride unto me in righteousness and in right ruling, white robes, right? And loving commitment and compassion. And I shall take you as a bride unto me in trustworthiness, and you shall know Yehovah. And it shall be in that day that I answer, declares Yehovah, that I answer the heavens, and they answer the earth, and the earth answer the grain, and the new wine, and the oil, and they answer Jezreel, the scattered ones. And I shall sow, I shall scatter. This is Matthew 13. He's going to scatter the seed out for Jezreel. This is how this whole thing's going to happen. This is how she's going to become the bride. This is how the children are going to come back. This is how they're going to come back to their Yah and get rid of the Baals. And I shall sow her for myself in the earth, and I shall have compassion on her who had not obtained compassion. And I shall say to those who are not my people, you are my people, while they say, my Elohim. Who? Those renewed of the house of Israel, the house of Judah, and the beasts of the field. They are the ones who will come in. Those people who were not his people will be his people. And of course, these are verses that are actually quoted in the book of Ephesians when he's talking about the Gentiles coming in. You were not the people of God. Now you are the people of God. Here's chapter 2 of Hosea singing the same song that Saul is now singing to them. And I'm just using that analogy because it's what's given to us in Revelation. The same mystery, if you would, that Saul is talking about in all of in all of his writings, in all of the epistles. All right, so was Peter right? Is this a song that's been sung since the beginning? Yeah, here it is right here. I will make a covenant with the beast, with you, and with the beast of the field. This is the Jeremiah 31:31. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and with the beast of the field. They will also come in. And how's that done? When he comes and he destroys Jerusalem first, sends out his Netzarim throughout the wilderness, throughout the time of Achan, and they come back and they become his bride. This is the story that we are reading about here in the book of Hosea, the same song. The mystery, the people, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Jews of the synagogues that were opposed to the idea that a Gentile could come in. They didn't know the song. They didn't understand this. They didn't see the mystery, I guess is just, probably a better way of saying it. So flash back, if you would, to Saul's quote in Romans 15. We looked at it last week. He actually quotes Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 and 10. He puts both verses together. Remember, he quotes Isaiah, he quotes Moses, and then he also quotes King David in the Psalms. So here's the quote that he quotes to make his point, to say that Jew and Gentile are to come together, that this is a song that's been sung for a long time. He says, and again, Yeshayahu, Isaiah says, there shall be a root of Jesse, and he who shall rise to reign over the nations, on him the nations shall set their hope or their expectation. And he's using that verse to make the point of the mystery, saying, look, people have been saying this for a long time. I'm not telling you something that's not in the scripture, but now I'm telling you this is what it means. This is the song they were singing. This is the mystery. Yeshua in Matthew chapter 13 teaches the same principle, and he speaks from Isaiah. Matthew 13, if you remember, is if you have a Bible that has maybe a topic, a title thing over it, it will say the mysteries of the kingdom. Well, hold on a second. What's the mystery? We just heard it. The mystery is that the nations will come in, a covenant will be made, and the beast of the field will be included in that covenant. Well, listen to Matthew 13. You're going to see the same story we just read in Hosea. Matthew 13, and here's verse 10. Listen to how Yeshua explains this whole situation. It says, and the taught ones came and said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered and said to them, because it has been given to you to know the secrets, the mystery. What mystery? The mystery we just read about. The mystery that if you do not get this, you will become wise in your own conceits, and a lot of problems are going to come out of that. The secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them, to who? To the Pharisees, to the Sadducees, to the priests, to the scribes, but to them, Jerusalem, to the leaders, it has not been given. It's not just that it has not been given, it's been hidden. It's been hidden from them because they have become the harlot. They have become everything Hosea was describing. And we know from what Hosea described, judgment is coming. First, the acceptable year of the Lord is coming, but judgment is coming after that. We call it 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem. So he says, but to them, the leaders, it has not been given. It has been hidden from them. For whoever possesses, whoever understands, whoever begins to understand. Guys, this is the process we are all going through right now. This is for all of us. We all need to really pay attention to what the Master is saying here, because this becomes the process that we all must go through. For him who possesses, to that person who begins to understand, who is willing to understand, who has eyes to see, ears to hear, a heart that's willing to obey. To that person who begins to possess, to understand, to him more shall be given. More what? More understanding. You'll get to understand what the mysteries are. Everybody wants to know the mysteries. Everybody wants to know all what the whole book is about. But if you don't start with the little bit, if you don't start at the beginning, the rest of it's not going to come. So for whoever possesses, to him more shall be given, and he shall have overflowingly. You want to know what all of this is about? Well, we're finding out now, but this comes over time and through effort and through obedience and through our willingness to read, to understand, and to put aside, not be wise in our own conceits. It says, but whoever does not possess, whoever's unwilling to learn, whoever's unwilling to see this, whoever's unwilling to begin at least to wrap their mind around this, or as the people of the first century, the Jews of the first century, the priests and the scribes, they refused to learn it. They didn't want to. They were set in their own prejudice. They wanted nothing to do with it. Even what they do possess, because don't forget, they did have some knowledge of Torah. There's no doubt about it. It was mixed with all the traditions of the fathers, but they had some knowledge. Even what they had shall be taken away from him. Because of this, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. So he's setting up how this whole process works. To what end? To tell us what the mysteries are. We already now know what the mystery is. Verse 14 goes on to say, this is the whole Matthew 13, and in them, in those who refuse to understand, who don't want to know the mystery. Guys, this not only goes for the people of the first century who refuse to understand this mystery, this goes for the people of the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, all the way up till today, who still refuse to understand this mystery, that the Gentiles are grafted into, supposed to be with, are supposed to become obedient, are supposed to be a sacrifice being prepared as holy, to come out of what they're coming out of, not to form some other separate, different thing. This has just as much, if not even more, emphasis on what and who we are today as it was on the people of the first century. And in them, the prophecy of Isaiah is completely filled or fulfilled, which says, here's Isaiah, hearing you shall hear. They heard the song. They read the Torah. They read Hosea. They still read Hosea. The song's still there. But in hearing, they shall hear and by no means understand. And seeing, they shall see and by no means perceive. They'll have a religious tradition, but they're not going to get it. They're going to be wise in their own understandings. Verse 15, for the heart of this people has become thickened, hard, and their ears have become hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. Guys, you do not ever want us to be that way. That's why we pray all the time. Give us eyes, ears, a heart. We've been praying this for years and years and years and years, and Yah has answered that prayer. It says, in their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and they should understand with their heart, and turn back, and I should heal them. What do they need to understand? What's being hidden from them? The mystery. What the whole book is actually about. The end game, if you would, or the transitory, the covenant coming, both with the house of Israel and including the beast of the field. Verse 16, and blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets, Hosea, Isaiah, all of them, they all sang the song. And they didn't even realize what it was all about. They didn't realize the magnitude of what was coming, how this thing was going to play out, how Yah was going to bring the world. They didn't even know it. Many prophets and righteous ones long to see what you see. Here is God returned to them, Messiah with them. As Hosea says, long to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. He's telling them, I want you to understand the mysteries. So here for the first time in Matthew 13 is when the mysteries are actually being revealed to us, to the apostles. But I'm not even sure, at the end they say, yeah, we get it, we understand. But it is Saul who actually really begins to understand. Peter experiences it, obviously, in Acts chapter 10. Then he understands, but even in Acts chapter 10, he didn't get it until this whole thing happened, and then he finally got it. So there was a lot of stuff they had to go through to really begin to understand the mystery. So what are the kingdom parables about? We don't have time to go through every one of the kingdom parables, but here's just a couple that you can see. This is the mystery. What's the first parable? The sower, the Jezreel, the scattering. Why does Yah scatter his seed all over the place? Because Jezreel is scattered. And he told us in Hosea, he's going to go after them even in the valley of Achor or Achin. He's going to go after them and he's going to woo them back to him. How? With his word, sending it out. Something's going to happen. Messiah is going to come. This story is going to explode. That's what's going to happen. He's going to send the seed out where? Amongst the nations. And some are going to get it, and some are going to go by the wayside, and some are going to be burnt up. And some are going to have, the whole story of the seed. That goes all the way back to the story of Hosea. He's telling us, Hosea, he's giving us the mysteries and explaining to us, this is what it means. What's the next one? The wheat and the tares. False brethren and real brethren. Religion, the religious people of the day, those who did not have eyes to see, they are going to be uprooted soon. When were they uprooted? 70 AD is when they were uprooted. And this gospel begins to go out. They were uprooted. The temple was uprooted. The temple was destroyed. Pharisaic Judaism and its hold in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, over the house of Israel, was broken. And the Netzarim were then scattered out into all the world. The mustard seed. What's the story of the mustard seed? A small little seed. I think it's Deuteronomy 7. I did not pick you because you were great in number. In fact, I picked you because you were small in number, but because I loved you. You were a small seed. God picked the house of Israel. Peter said, who did God speak to sing this song? He spoke to the house of Israel. That small seed becomes a great tree. There it is again. People are called trees. It becomes a great tree so that what happens? So that the birds of the air and the beast of the field have shade underneath the tree. That's exactly the covenant that we read about in the book of Hosea. And we can go through more and more of the parables. They're all about this mystery, this thing that needs to be understood, that Saul is trying to get across to us to say, you need to know this. We need to know this. And if we don't, we're going to mess up really, really bad. And that's exactly what we've done. It's always been there. This song has been being sung since the beginning. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 18. This is the story, of course, of Noah. Well, think about what the story of Noah is all about. Verse 8 says, or verse 18 says, and I shall establish my covenant with you, speaking of Noah, the whole flood thing's coming, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. A small group of people, a little mustard seed, a small group of people, and all of the living of all flesh, 2 of each, you are to bring into the ark to keep them alive. And I put it in blue so that you get it, because these are the words that also come out of Romans, that the uncultivated branch is supposed to be with and among the cultivated branch, not the other way around. Noah and his family didn't get in an ark full of animals. The animals got in an ark made by Noah to keep them alive with you after their kind, of all the creeping creatures on all of the ground after their kind, 2 of each shall come to you to keep them alive. Who does Noah bring with him? What is the song that's being sung? Yah is going to pick a small group of faithful people that he's given the information of the ark to, and the nations, the animals, the beast are going to be included in this covenant. Guys, that's the same song. It's the same song that's been being sung. And where is it sung? In Genesis 6. It's right in the beginning. Paul is correct. Peter is correct. This song, this message was given. Truly, Yah is not a respecter of persons, men from all the nations. This has always been the song. This is the issue. And again, we've got to understand, it is not, again, it's not the animals in the ark are having their own ark or doing something different. The animals came with the Noah and his family. And so it is the uncultivated branches that are to be grafted into and with and among the cultivated branches to learn from them. That's the mystery, guys. So the mystery appears right in the beginning of Genesis. We already read it in Hosea, but that's not the only place. Remember, this is a song that only a certain group of people have sung. Of all the people on the planet, only a certain group of people can sing it. Here is remember we said that Saul quoted Isaiah 11 verses 1 and 10. Now we went over this a little bit in our morning manna, and I've been trying to connect them together for this particular Wednesday so that we can kind of put the whole story together. Here is Isaiah 11. Knowing what we know now, let's see what this says. Isaiah 11 verses 1 through 16. And a rod shall come forth from the stump of Jesse, which is what we just finished, reading in Romans 15, the verse Shaul uses. A sprout, a netzar, a branch. From his roots, the branch obviously is Yeshua, he's the Netzarim, so he's from Nazareth. From his roots shall be fruitful. We're talking about Yeshua. The Spirit of Yehovah shall rest on him without measure. Remember, it tells us when Yeshua comes and he receives the Spirit, he receives it without measure. He receives all 7 of the spirits, all the whole kit and caboodle of who the Spirit of God is on Yeshua. The spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yehovah, and shall make him breathe in the fear of Yehovah, and he shall not judge in the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness. We want to remember that when Yah is going to judge us, he's going to judge us with righteousness. In other words, his standard of righteousness. With righteousness he shall judge the poor, and shall decide the straightness for the meek ones of the earth. And here it is, and shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. This is talking about when Messiah comes. He's talking about the kingdom. He's talking about the sword coming from his mouth. He's talking about those that will be with him that will also rule with an iron rod. So you get a little bit of a historical context or a prophetic context of what Isaiah is speaking about. And one more time, and he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and stay the wrong with the breath of his lips. Verse 5, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist. Next verse, verse 6. And when this comes, what's going to be when Yah rules with an iron rod? And the wolf, the beast, that's what a wolf is, it's a beast, the nations. And the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and the little child leads them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones lie down together, and a lion eat straw like an ox. And the nursing child shall play with the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. They shall do no evil, nor destroy in all my set-apart mountain, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yehovah as the waters cover the sea. Now, I know we've probably all heard and read and seen pamphlets put out by different groups and organizations, pictures of, people walking around, and there's, in the kingdom, and there's lions there, and people are, holding cobras and snakes, and little kids playing with a bear or whatever, Well, we've seen all the pictures. You've gotten all that. That's a total misunderstanding. That's not, believe me, in the kingdom, if you put your hand in a snake pit and it's venomous snakes and you do that, you're going to get bit and you're probably going to die. Yes, in the millennial kingdom, you will probably die. If you go into a lion's pit of hungry lions, they are going to tear you apart and they are going to eat you and you are going to die. This has nothing to do with a change in the animal kingdom when Messiah's kingdom comes. He's not talking about animals. He's talking about the nations. The nations, when the rod of Jesse comes, when he comes to rule with an iron rod, the nations will be together. There'll be no more war. There'll be no more taking your plowshares and making them into swords. It will be the opposite way. That is what Isaiah is telling us, which is what? The covenant with the beast of the field. This is the same song. And yet we've read it and read it and read it, and we've gotten right over it, and it's been missed for so long because you need eyes to see and ears to hear. Listen to what it goes on to say. Verse 9 again, they do no evil nor destroy in all my set apart mountain, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yehovah as the waters cover the sea. We're going to understand during the millennial kingdom. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, Yeshua of Nazareth, standing as a banner to the people. That's this a banner to what people? To the nations. That's very similar. In fact, not similar. That is what is being referred to in Revelation 19 when it says that he has a name written on his thigh. It's not that there's a name on his thigh. He's holding a banner that's connected to his thigh, a pole with a banner on it. That's what's being referenced here. This is who we're talking about, the coming of Messiah, the destruction of those beasts, those nations that need to be removed, and the nations that don't will be lying down together. No more war, no more making a war and evil towards one another. He will stand as a banner to the people, unto the nations. The beast of the field shall seek, and his rest, his Sabbath, shall be glory. Messiah Sabbath, the millennial day, the seventh day will be a Sabbath. So here's the same song. It's the same song in Isaiah. And it doesn't stop there. Listen to what else Isaiah says, because it goes on. Verse 11, and it shall be in that day that Yehovah sets his hand again the second time to recover the remnant. That's what we were reading about in Hosea. That remnant, that scattered people, Jezreel, are going to be wooed back and a covenant made with the animals, with the beast. In that day he shall again recover the remnant for the second time of his people who are left. From Asher, from the northern house, from Mitzrayim, Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, from Eliam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Those scattered, he gets them how? By scattering his seed to get them to understand, to come back and to be the bride, to remarry him, which is exactly what we read in Hosea. Verse 12, and he shall raise a banner for the nations on his thigh again, Revelation 19, and gather the outcast of Israel and assemble the dispersed of Judah. Where? From the four corners of the earth. The resurrection, he's going to pull us all out from all over the world. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not trouble Ephraim. That animosity, that thing against, it's not going to be there anymore. But they shall fly down. Why are we going to fly down? Because we're going to meet them in the air. We're going to fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines toward the west. Together they plunder the people of the east. Their hand stretching forth from Edom to Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. This is speaking about that time of that same song that has been sung, but that so many just did not get. The mysteries Yeshua is revealing in Matthew 13, the mysteries Shaul is revealing in his books, the mystery that is spoken by the seven thunders and in the book of Revelation. This is the mystery. This is what the whole thing has really been about. Isaiah 40. So we said about the comfort, right? I mentioned that before. So when does all this start? How does all this start? Because Isaiah gives us all sorts of different pieces, and some are chronological, like we were just reading. These are the events that are going to happen. He's going to come. He's going to let the nations lie down together. He's going to be a banner. But he gives us different pieces and glimpses, and you got to put it all together. And the way you put it all together is to understand Revelation, and really to understand history, the way history has unfolded. But when we speak about the comfort of Zion, here it is. The comfort is the gospel. How did Peter tell us all of this happened? He came to his witnesses. He came through Israel. The song was sung to Israel. We saw him. We ate with him. He sent us out. We told them about the one. We're telling the nations, the people, we're telling them about the one who came. Yehovah came, died, rose again 3 days later. That's the story. Well, that's the comfort. Here's Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 5, I think it is. It says, comfort my people, says your Elohim. Speak to the hearts of Jerusalem. Why speak to Jerusalem? Why comfort Jerusalem? Because she's about to be divorced. She's about to be destroyed. But before that happens, Yah is going to speak comforting words to her. How? When? When does this happen? It'll tell us exactly. And cry out to her that her hard service is completed and her crookedness is pardoned, that she has received from the hand of Yehovah double for her sins, 70 AD. When does this comfort begin? The voice of one crying in the wilderness. Who's that? Well, we now know that is, in fact, John the Baptist. When does the comfort, the gospel that begins this covenant that includes the house of Judah, the house of Israel, the beast of the field, the birds of the air underneath this one tree? When the one who is in the wilderness says, prepare the way of Yehovah, make straight in the desert a highway for our Elohim. Let every valley be raised and every mountain and hill made low, and the steep ground shall become level, and the rough places shall become smooth. You who bring good news. Who brings the good news after John the Baptist says these words? The Netzarim do. First Yeshua does, obviously, and then the Netzarim, which is what Peter is telling us in Acts chapter 10. You who bring good news to Zion, the Netzarim, go up into the high mountain. You who bring good news, the gospel, to Jerusalem. The gospel has to go to Jerusalem first. Why? Because it is to the Jew first. Those that are Jewish, that really have eyes to see, they'll get it, the Netzarim. Those that didn't, they're going to be judged. They're going to be put away. They're going to be orphan children. Let me see where we are. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with strength. Lift it up. Be not afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, see your Elohim. And which is exactly what they did. Here's Yeshua. Look at him. He's right here. He's standing in our midst. See your Elohim. See the Master Yehovah comes with strength, and his arm rules for him. The right arm of the Lord is the Passover arm. That's who Yeshua is. See, his reward is with him and his recompense before him. He's given a reward, he's given comfort, but recompense as well. Wrath is also coming just 40 years after these events. He feeds his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs with his arm and he carries them in his bosom. This is what Yeshua said. There's 99. He leaves the 99 and he goes and he gets the one and he brings it back. He also says that he's the good shepherd and he has the sheep that are there, but he also has other sheep. Those other sheep also have to come, and the two sheepfold must be one together, in one ark together. He gathers the lambs in his arms and he carries them in his bosom, gently loading those who are with young. He has another sheepfold too, the nations. They must be joined together. And of course, you can check that. That's in John chapter 10. I'm almost out of time here. All of this, I know we talked about the mysteries, but I want you to see this is a song that has been sung right from the beginning. This has been it's been a mystery. They didn't know it. They couldn't get it. And we fought against it. And even till today, we still fight against it, saying that there's a different thing for one group, a different thing for a Gentile group, and a different thing for a Jewish group. And beloved, that is just not what Paul is talking about. It's not what Yeshua was talking about. It is not the song that was sung by the first fruits of the house of Israel, resurrected on the day of first fruits. Why is this all important? I'm going to skip over to Romans 16 just to give you just a little snippet so you can see this. This mystery is important. Romans 16 and verse 17 says, "Now I call upon you, brothers, which watch out for those who cause divisions and stumbling contrary to the teaching which you learned." What teaching is the whole, like the last 7-8 chapters of Romans about? The mystery. Watch out for those who teach differently about the mystery. Teach that there's one thing for one group, one thing for another. The things don't apply to us, they only apply to them. We're special and different. God's done with that group, because that's not the mystery. That's not the song that has been sung throughout the ages. And he says, be careful for those who cause divisions and stumblings, contrary to the teaching which you learned. And do what? Turn away from them. For such ones do not serve our Master Yeshua Messiah, but their own stomach. And by smooth words and flattering speech, they deceive the hearts of the innocent. Okay. We'll stop right there. I know I'm leaving you a little bit of a cliffhanger. We'll get to that. We still got much more to share with you. We're almost at the end of the book, but I thought it very, very important that you understand this is a song that has been sung for a long time. We didn't even get into Revelation and all the different verses that speak about this as well, but this is how you really, this is how the whole book comes together. This is the core mystery throughout the book. Obviously, the coming of Yeshua. Check out tomorrow morning's Morning Manna. We'll talk about that. But this is the mystery. How is Yah going to accomplish this? Well, there it is. There it is. It is the mystery. He's going to make of all people, one people, under the name, the house of Israel, one tree, and all the animals and all the nations and all the beasts of the field and the birds of the air will come under it. And it will become the biggest tree in the garden. Okay, so we'll stop right there, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I want to remind everybody, we put out some information. It's on our app. You can check it out. There is a sort of, it's not called GoFundMe. I forgot what the actual name is, but you can check out the app. We're trying to bless Brother G and his wife. You know, they were in a really serious car accident. Cars totaled, and if we can help them out, if you can help them out, you can go to our app. It'll lead you right to the GoFundMe page. And you know, if Yasu leads, if you want to help them out, that would be wonderful. We pray, Brother G, for your recovery, full recovery. And we're grateful that that you're okay. So if you want to do that, that would be awesome. Don't forget to join us this Saturday at 10 o'clock as we continue with our hidden manna. Got some neat stuff to share with you there. And of course, this weekend as we continue with the gospel stories, all the messages, everything kind of all ties together. And so, you know, join us. We absolutely invite you. Thank you so much for being part of our study tonight. Don't forget, if you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share it, leave some comments, let us know where you are. I see some people chatting on the chat. Thank you so much, guys. God bless, and as always, shalom.